on a day of judgment, who is actually doing the judging? We who believe in God assume it's God. God weighs us up, assessing our deeds. Liturgy in most religions supports that. But sit with this more personally for a moment. Sit with your own story. Narrow it down to this week. And tell yourself honestly, how many verdicts have you meted out to other people before lunchtime on any given day? The colleague who was short with you, the family member who didn't text back soon enough, the stranger in traffic. We treat God's judgment as the frightening one, and we barely notice the courtroom that we're personally running all day long, gavel in hand, sentencing people for things we'd forgive or at least overlook instantly in ourselves. Most of us aren't short on the capacity to forgive. It's built into our operating system. We're short on the willingness to point that capacity at anyone but ourselves, and sometimes not even ourselves. Now, before I tell you what Jewish tradition says forgiveness is, I want to clear away what it isn't, because most of the resistance that I hear to forgiveness is really a kind of resistance to myth about forgiveness, not the real thing. Forgiveness is not condoning. To forgive someone is not to announce that what they did was acceptable. Forgiveness is not forgetting. You're allowed to remember exactly what happened, how it happened in complete color, in detail, and still forgive. And forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Reconciliation takes two people or two parties and rebuilds a relationship. Forgiveness takes one person and releases a weight. You can forgive someone you never speak to again. You can forgive someone who is no longer alive. You can forgive someone who never even finds out you forgave them. The distinction alone solves half the resistance I hear people say, because they'll say, if I forgive him, it's like I'm saying it was okay. Or if I forgive her, then I have to let her back into my life. No, it's not true. You're allowed to forgive someone and still keep every healthy boundary you've built. Forgiveness isn't a justice equation. As my friend and colleague Pastor Dave Roberts puts it, it's a freedom equation. It isn't there to restore fairness, it's there to set you free. Now here's where I think Jewish tradition gives you something you won't find in most of the content out there, because it doesn't treat forgiveness as one thing. It gives you three different words for the different movements. And once you know them, I hope you'll never think about this as flatly as forgive and forget again. So the first one, you might want to write this down, or you can always download the podcast or save it. The first word is slicha, and slicha it's an act of the heart, reaching an understanding of the person who hurt you. What does it mean? It means recognizing that they too, like you, are human, frail, capable of failure the way you are. Slicha doesn't require the other person to do anything. It doesn't require reconciliation. It's the internal shift where you stop needing them to suffer for what they did. Again, the word is slicha. The second is mechila, literally a wiping away. Mechila is the answer to a very specific question. Can we put this relationship back on the footing it was on before the wrong happened? Mechila is a release of debt. And then the classic Jewish view, mechila, it's something the offended person owes the offender only once genuine teshuvah, genuine repentance has taken place. It's not a formality. It's real acknowledgement. It's real change. It's real accountability. Again, mechila. That's the second one. And the third is kapara, atonement. The same root as Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Kapara is the deepest layer. It's a total cleansing of the wrongdoing. And the tradition is very clear that this one isn't ours to give. No human being can fully purify another person's moral failure. That belongs, we believe, to God alone. So listen to those words again. Slicha, mechila, and kapara. Understanding, release, and cleansing. An important read on this subject is by a scholar. The book sits on my shelf with lots of tab pages. The scholar is named Solomon Schimmel. I hope the book is still in print. If it is, I urge you to read it. It's called Wounds Not Healed by Time. He looks at various approaches to forgiveness, and he makes the case, in this case, that classical Judaism treats sweeping, unconditional forgiveness with real caution on both moral and psychological grounds. Judaism, he says, doesn't ask you to pretend a wrong wasn't a wrong. It doesn't ask the offended party to do all the emotional labor, while the offender does none. Mechila, full relational forgiveness, is bound up with teshuvah, a real repair, with the wrongdoer actually reckoning with what they did. Schimmel's own conclusion after walking through everything from marital betrayal to the Holocaust is that healing comes from finding the right balance of three things together: justice, repentance, and forgiveness, not forgiveness alone. Now, I find that much more honest than the kind of greetings card version. This approach says your anger, when it's a response to a real wrong, is not a character flaw you need to medicate away with some kind of positivity. It's information. And forgiveness done right doesn't erase that information. Dr. Robert Enright, that's a name that might be familiar to you. He's sometimes called the father of forgiveness research. He spent decades building a sequence. First, honestly uncovering how angry you are instead of minimizing it, so there's the feeling. Then a real decision to forgive, a kind of change point. Then active work, trying to understand the offender's humanity, their damage, their own story. And then, over time, a kind of release. Now, notice how closely that mirrors slicha in the Jewish practice. Reaching an understanding of the other person's frailty is not the first move. It's a stage you work toward. Another name that might be familiar, Everett Worthington, another leading researcher, built a useful model. Recall the hurt honestly, empathize with the person who hurt you, offer forgiveness as a kind of gift rather than something earned, commit to that decision, and then hold on to it when the old feeling resurfaces, because it will. You might need greater motivation than that. You might need greater motivation than I have offered so far. So consider the physiology of forgiveness. People who carry chronic unforgiveness show measurably higher blood pressure, higher stress hormones, and greater cardiovascular strain. People who work through forgiveness, really work through it, not just saying the word, show those markers coming back down, along with better sleep and a lower long-term risk of chronic illness. Now, this obviously isn't my finding as a rabbi. It's what I read in modern medicine. It's confirming something the rabbis understood 2,000 years earlier, that a grudge isn't neutral. It has a cost to you, to your body, to your psyche, every single day that you carry it. You're not obligated to rebuild a relationship with someone who hasn't done the work. But if they have done it, and if you find yourself still withholding forgiveness out of habit or pride or the pleasure of the verdict, remember that teaching, that Jewish teaching. At that point, the tradition says, my tradition says, the unresolved sin, the wrongdoing, is not theirs anymore, it's yours. Then there's kapara, full atonement, full cleansing. Let that one go. It was never yours to grant in the first place. That relieves a pressure most people don't even realize they're carrying. The sense that your forgiveness has to be total and cosmic to count, it just doesn't. Slicha alone on its own is already real. It's already enough to put the cold down, to end the pain. Whatever you understand about God, leave that kind of cleansing to one with greater capacity than yours or mine. None of this happens on a deadline, and none of it happens in one sitting. Just notice how closely it actually maps onto what the researchers in modern day found from a completely different direction. Enright's uncovering and deciding, working, deepening. Worthington's recall, empathize, offer the gift, commit, hold on. Different vocabulary, right? But at the same time, a same shape, arriving from a research lab instead of an ancient Beit Midrash, a house of study. When both the modern psychology and the 2,000-year-old law code agree, then I think there's something to be trusted in this wisdom. And remember, time alone doesn't do enough. Not enough real healing. I sat with people who were probably as angry at year 10 as they were at year 1 because they were waiting for time to do the work that only their own intention and effort can do. Forgiveness is not a passive process that happens while you wait. It's active. It's a decision upon decisions, then a practice, then eventually for some wounds, not all, and that's all right. It's a kind of peace. So go back to the first story, the first image I shared, the man who comes to the Rebbe and he says, I can't forgive my brother. He's betrayed me more than once. And the rabbi's answer wasn't a lecture about the brother. It was, in a way, a holding up of a mirror. He said, then you will never be free. Now, I'd ask you to do one more thing in case this is helpful to you. Think about the people, that person that you thought about at the beginning of the episode, and ask yourself honestly what you actually owe them, understanding or restoration, or nothing at all except your own release. And ask yourself the harder question, underneath all of it, what would it actually cost me to let this go?